Ooh. Hello, urban sketchers. Hello, urban sketchers around the world. Welcome again to another episode of USK Talks. It is so good to see all of you. I can see you already starting the comments. Hello, Sue. Hey, Atari. Hi, how are you? The Terry Terrible. Kumi, thank you for joining us from Japan. There's Mario from Lisbon. Francoise is from Reunion. I see so many familiar names, and you know what? It's a reunion for me as well. So if you've just joined in, if this is your first time, welcome to USK Talks. I'm Rob, your host, coming to you live from Hong Kong. It's 11 p.m. here, 3 p.m. GMT. I know that there's a lot of time change going on. I hope that hasn't caused a lot of confusion or anything. But, well, it's always so good to see all of you. And from one couch to another, we're ready for another show. Now, I have my question for you this week. I'd like to know, those of you who've just joined us, welcome. I'd like to know if you've been following USK Talks through season 1, season 2. In season 2 specifically, I'd like you to tell me in the comments which has been your favorite episode, and very briefly, why. Which episode in season 2 has been your favorite and why? And while I'm waiting for your responses, hello to all the people who've joined in. I can see all the comments. So good to see you all. The reason I ask is we are just past the halfway point. We've passed the halfway point for season 2, and we have a few announcements to make. First up, next week, USK Talks is going to be on a break, and we will be back the week after that on the 4th of April. And on the 11th of April, the time will change. We're at 3 p.m. GMT. We're going to go to 3 a.m. GMT. And if you forget, don't worry. There's going to be a lot of promos in social media that's going to remind you. But just in case, keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm just looking at the responses now. Simone is saying her favorite is Mario's talks, Ruskin and Victoria moment. Yes, we know Mario is really, really popular. And thank you, because he's like, oh, I don't know whether people want to listen to history. Mario, I know you're watching now. Lots of people love your history lessons. Again, last week's episode, Lynn is saying about women sketching history. Anne Marie, you're saying Paris reportage and the episode with Lebanon. Thank you. So we're really glad that you're all enjoying the show. Today, we have a really powerful episode for you. If you've seen the promos, you know that we have Johanna from Germany who's going to join us, as well as George Butler, who's an award-winning reportage artist. Johanna's going to come on first, and George will be joining us in the second half. Now, they both do magical things with ink. And they both have different approaches on how they do storytelling. But one thing they do have in common really is the ability to tell really, really powerful stories. So for those of you who are curious about how to take your visual storytelling, your reportage to the next level, tune in. This is going to be a powerful, intense episode. And get ready to take notes, or you can always, watch the episode again. So first up, we're going to bring Johanna up and invite her to the show. Hello, Johanna. How are you?
Hi, good to see you.
So good to see you. Thank you very much for joining us on the show, for agreeing to share all your experience with us, because I love in particular that personal project, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later on in your segment. But first, Johanna, I'd like to invite you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Well, I'm an urban sketcher, obviously. I was joined Urban Sketches, I think 5 years ago, but I sketched before that. And for a living, I'm a set designer or a scenographer. So I'm doing commercial setups, stage design, basically. So, and that's an important connection because I have to sketch to bring ideas in and to get a feel for the world, let's say, and this I can incorporate in my work.
So you're really used to telling stories visually then, and visualizing your
Yeah,
concepts and ideas and that sort of thing.
exactly.
Okay, that's perfect. And your work is really incredible. I mean, let's kick up the slideshow and show and start talking about that. You do amazing things with ink. So I'd like to ask you, when did you start using this particular technique? And is it a brush pen? Is it a Fude pen? What is it that you
So
use?
this is really done with a big brush. So these are quite big. These are like, I think, 60 centimeters by 40 or something like that.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's done with brush. And I think I started this 3 years ago, this style. So
Hmm.
actually, this sketchbook kicked it off for me. Um, yeah, and since then I've gone further with that technique, but I also like to use lots of different styles because for me it always depends on the situation. You know, sometimes the
Hmm.
situation feels like, okay, now I'm using ink and going really broad strokes, and then sometimes I have a really small sketchbook. So
Okay.
or I even do it in acrylics or oil sometimes.
Oh.
So, yeah, so it
So
depends
it's
really.
quite a variety, although like a lot of us know you for your incredible work with ink, that you've been posting a lot on social media. You also do a lot of like this heavy machinery. Like, can you tell
Yeah,
us what that's about? I mean, it's fantastic that the
yeah.
earth movers and the trucks and all that.
I really love to do like
Mhm.
industrial things, and also if it's a
Uh-huh.
bit gritty and dirty and machines, and that's really fascinating. So I just love the stuff. But I
Okay.
also love to do people. So
Ah,
it's
yes. Well, you seem to be one of those sketches who can do anything, and I can see that you also draw wherever you go. I mean, you do
yeah,
windows, you do cars.
yeah,
You also you have this amazing way of using colors. Like a lot of like this is one of the more colorful pieces that I've
yeah,
seen, but you also do a lot of black and white with just these spots of color.
yes.
How do you make those choices?
It's just depends on the mood, you know. So I really love to work on toned paper with color because then the color really pops, and
Hmm.
that's what we see actually later on.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
again, it depends.
It depends. Okay. So it depends what you feel like doing. Okay, I've got to show everyone this because this is a crazy, incredible piece. It is so detailed. It's amazing. It's really, really, really stunning. So, what size is this? And tell us a little bit like how you do something
So,
like that.
so this is 1 meter by 70 centimeters, and actually I did this at the same time as the project we later talk about. And it's,
Okay.
as you can see, it's a total different style, like totally controlled, and it really took a long time. And I can show
Yes.
you the.
Please show us. Okay, and let me solo you so that we can see. Oh, wow. Is that the actual piece or is that a
Yeah,
print?
that's the actual piece. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And you used a what, a micron pen or something?
Yeah,
What was
exactly. Yeah, it's a 9 liner. So several. So I think I used a dozen
use
for
a dozen? Okay. I
because
I can't imagine. And it looks like you were cross hatching
yeah,
and
cross hatching. It was really when I started that I was like,
Mhm.
oh, what have I done? But it was really another expression of anxiety, I think, you know, like to
Mhm.
be in this control and to be very disciplined and to yeah, finish this piece. So it really took
Okay.
some days.
Oh, it's totally amazing. And again, it goes to the that repertoire that you have and the ability for you to control different things, some quick, some and the and that amazing detail. So how long did that piece take you to do?
I think a week or something like that.
A week. Is that
Yeah,
all? Okay.
yeah.
Well, it okay. And this was part of a series that you did, like a whole bunch of work that you did during lockdown last year, correct?
Exactly. So that was actually the last part of Inktober.
Okay.
Inktober in
Okay.
combination with urban sketching. So
Well, you're setting a really high bar for Inktober. Okay, so I'd really like to jump into the personal project that you did. So those of us who followed you on social media, we noticed that you were doing lots of drawings about your dad. Can you tell us how this started? What was the motivation and how all that came about?
So it started in early spring when my mom actually asked me to do a drawing of my dad. So my dad at the time was 93. And I've never really done many sketches of him because maybe all of you know that sometimes it's hard to draw someone who's really close to you because you're like scared to mess it up. It's easier to draw people that you don't know. And and then so of course when the lockdown started, we watched a lot of news, and there was also the question, so what do I draw? And I think that was the perfect combination of portraying my dad and also bringing in always a new theme, so always an interesting setup. And well, we all had the feeling that it might be so his life might be coming to an end. So at 93, of course, it's inevitable, let's say. But well, it turned out to be this very personal situation.
So it was your mom who asked you, and you did this incredible series. I think it's such a personal, powerful story, and the way that you've drawn him as well in that same position with the TV, and the TV is actually like that combination is logging that particular time as well during lockdown.
Yes.
Last year, and tell us so what was happening here.
So this is actually the last image, or one of the last. So when Biden, after all this counting the votes, and it took days and days, when Biden finally said that they had won. And that is also one of the last images of my dad in front of the TV screen.
On the TV. Well, I'm already looking in the comments, and people are saying that the way you've done this series is, first, it's so moving, it's so personal, and it's very, very strong storytelling as well. So I love how you've managed to find all this inspiration. And at the same time, what must it be like for you? Because it's also really painful. So how did you process the emotion of doing this on a daily basis and telling this particular story that you're sharing with everyone on social media?
Well, I think drawing is sometimes like a form of caressing what you see. You know, so for one thing, it's a process that you observe something and you take it in and you process this, and then it comes out again, and it's a way to deal with that as well. So actually, when I'm drawing, I think I feel like I'm calming down, and it's easier to look at these hard facts. The fact that the person you love is soon to be gone.
Slipping away.
And you know that when you really closely watch that person and you trace this person, then it's a special kind of connection, I would say. Yeah, and it's a way of saying, it was a way of saying goodbye also, and holding that moment, you know.
I can only imagine. How did your dad feel about this? How did your father feel about this?
Well, he was in a state that I think he didn't really realize what I was. So the other problem was that he was almost blind, so he couldn't really see the drawings.
Okay.
So yeah.
I see. Okay. Well, it's such a powerful series, and you also captured him right at the end.
Yes.
This is, I mean, looking at that entire series and collection of work, like the way you've gone into that, there is such a beautiful simplicity about this. And tell us what it was like to actually draw this, and when in the whole process this was.
Yeah. So when he was in the end really couldn't get up from bed, so actually a few days before he passed away, I felt like now's the time to do these last sketches, which are also very big, like 60 by 40, something like that.
Wow.
And it's totally different feeling as opposed to the small sketchbooks. So the small sketchbooks are like this.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And these other drawings, they are like, oops.
Oh, wow.
Like this.
And that was towards the end.
That was towards the end. And yeah, it's a way of dealing with the pain. So in that moment, you are so focused on also to make it good, you know, to
Right.
really.
It's a way to honor him.
Yes, to honor
and to
him.
Celebrate his life.
And then I felt like totally focused. So in that moment, it wasn't that painful, only before and after, you know.
Okay.
But now I think I did like 40 of these sketches.
Wow.
And now when I look at these, I'm very glad that I did this, because I mean, I also have to now remember him as he was before he got sick, you know, like
Right.
the life he had, and he really changed in the during the last months. So,
And after he passed away as well, you had a project that you put together. Let's share the screen. Tell us how that came about and what you did to put this series of drawings together.
Yes, so that's a project that's it's a video installation. It's not realized yet, because now then there was the second wave, and now we have the third wave. So I'm still hoping to set this up, but this is a test setup. So actually, basically, I'm building a really big sketchbook out of gauze frames, and then you have a projection on that, and it's a bit animated. Yeah, you can see it like that, so like bringing it a bit to life, and you can sit in front of it in a chair, like. So the visitor is like my dad, watching my dad.
Wow.
And so it's, yeah, an interpretation of the moment. And the whole project is a scholarship by Hessische Kulturstiftung, so the Cultural Foundation of Hesse, the state of Hesse.
Okay.
And so I have got this grant to do this. But the problem is when can I show it for real?
Okay. Well, I think it's such a powerful idea. What a way to honor your dad. And I hope that when you can actually show it, a lot of sketchers are also able to see it.
Yeah, that would be
And for those of us who are not able to visit you in Germany, then I hope that you share a lot of it on social media so that we can see what the actual
for sure.
process is like. What is the kind of scale that we're looking at here? Oh yeah, this the chair
Yeah,
gives us an
so
idea.
it's 2 by 3 meters,
Okay.
something around that.
That's really so beautiful. The way you've brought in what you do as a scenographer, set designer, and you're creating this tribute as an artist as well, and telling the story of your dad's final few months. How did this, when you decided to do something like this, did it immediately come to you, okay, I'm going to draw my dad in front of the TV? What was the evolution of the idea?
Well, it was just by chance, I guess. So I think when I first drew him, it was like, okay, he's sitting there and I'm drawing him in front of the TV. And then it was like, because we really watched a lot of news during those times, because you wanted to be updated on what is going on with the lockdown and what is happening all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So like we watched 4 news shows in the evening,
Wow.
And then I thought sometimes there were images that were so powerful, visuals from the news, that I was like, oh, that would be so interesting to sketch. So actually, the first one you showed with the supermoon,
Right.
that was, it's not a very important story that the moon is very close to the Earth, but the visual is so cool, and that's when I thought about, oh, it's really interesting to find interesting visuals that also connect to these crazy times.
Right.
Like when I watched the speech of the Queen, which was, they said it's only I think the 5th time that she made a speech, emergency speech like that.
Right.
And that was very, then you feel like, oh, that's so interesting to catch that. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Also, all the press conferences where it's of course easy to make a portrait of people, and that was at the funeral of George Floyd and so on.
Right. So many moments in history, and what a way to capture it all together. 2020 is definitely a year to remember, and you've memorialized it in such a poignant way. I can just see in the comments, like, people are very moved and very touched. The way you capture history, like that particular piece, and you said, like, the Queen speaking, Angela Merkel's making a lot of speeches also.
Yeah, and I mean, she always has this colorful coats, which makes like, the color combination is so nice, no matter what she says. But today it's the pink one. Yes.
Okay. And you did all this while under lockdown. What advice do you have for sketchers who feel like, well, they did a whole bunch of challenges and they are Zooming with friends and they're trying so hard to find stories to tell, but they've run out of ideas? What advice do you have for sketchers under that situation, especially now when some parts of Europe are going under lockdown again?
Yeah. Well, I think you have to look also for the personal stories. What really moves you? What kind of situation are you in? I think sometimes it's not about what you like to draw, but what you have to draw. And even if it's a difficult topic, yeah, but I think if you have something that really moves you, then the story comes
Right.
by itself.
And then the story starts to tell itself. Okay, we've got a good question here from the Terry Terrible, who would like to know how you captured the scenes on TV, because they were moving and news and it goes really quickly and all that.
Yeah. Well, so there's two approaches. So when you watch a press conference, usually you always cut back to the same scene or the same setup. So watch the whole press conference.
Okay, and it looks like you. Sorry, it looks like you also have skills with like a really powerful memory to lock particular.
Yes, that's the other thing. So sometimes the visuals are so powerful that you have to really look at them and let them burn in your mind, and then you have to be really quick about it. So, for instance, the Belarus demonstration with all the red flags.
With all the flags. Yeah.
So first of all, you see that on every news show, so it returns the image because it's so powerful, So right. And I don't have to draw every single building the way it is. I have to draw
You're capturing an impression.
Capturing the impression, Yeah. And so that's what you can do. And so in Germany, it's like when the a news person talks, they sometimes have a highlight image behind them, so they talk a longer time over that image.
Okay.
And I usually do just the outlines, and of course the colors you can do while other things happening. Or sometimes when I'm interested in the anchor man, then or anchor woman, then I just start to draw them as they always return, and then I think about
what to fill in the background.
Right. So I always started with my dad, and then I waited for the good news or bad news to come.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, it's practice, right? So the first one's really crappy.
But I can imagine, like, when this happened, I mean, Biden was on the news all the time, so you could just decide, okay.
Yeah. So, and with this, I watched the whole speech, actually. So, it wasn't the news show, but I watched the live feed. So, and then of course you have a lot of time to do a portrait.
Okay. Well, I think we've learned a lot from that, and I have to thank you again, Johanna, because you shared such a personal, painful story, and you've given, I think, Urban Sketchers an idea of how they can deal with some similar sorts of situations. I think some people might have sketched this sort of situation when their parents are passing, or someone very close in family and all that, but not many would actually share it. The fact that you did a project, you made a whole project out of it, and you're sharing that, and after that you're preparing this video installation, I think is a really great idea and a fantastic tribute to your dad. Okay, that brings us to the end of this particular segment. One more last tip that you have for the audience who would like to tackle a project like this? What advice would you give them?
You mean in what way tackle the project?
Yes.
Yeah.
One important piece of advice.
Well, one important. Well, again, I think if you have a personal motivation and it's really important to you, then that's the most important. Don't think about what others think about this, but do what you want to do, and then it will come out interesting, I think.
Yeah, and tell the story.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's really beautiful. Thank you so much. Again, let's raise our mugs, and I hope to see you again soon, Johanna, in person, so that we can draw
Yes,
together.
I hope so, Rob.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye bye. That was Johanna Krimmel from Germany. I hope I said her name right. If you've just joined us, welcome to USK Talks. To this episode, we're talking to two guests. We just spoke to Johanna. We're inviting next George Butler from London, who's going to tell us about his experience as a reportage artist. And stick around. If you've just tuned in, stick around because this is going to be really awesome as well. George, how are you?
Hi, Rob. Very well, thank you. How are you?
Thank you so much for agreeing to join us on Urban Sketchers. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm sure everyone's curious. Like the fact that you're a reportage artist and you basically what you're doing is telling stories visually through drawing. Have you ever joined any actual Urban Sketcher sketch walks or anything like that?
I'm afraid not. No, I haven't.
Not yet, then. Perhaps.
Not yet. No.
Okay. Well, we
Any
certainly
minute now
hope
in London.
to. We certainly hope to see you sometime in the future. You have a lot of fans who know of your work, and it's really powerful stuff. First, let me put your hero photo on the screen. Everyone, this is George's Instagram, George Butler Illustration. And let's kick off by showing this little video, and maybe you can explain to us what you do in your own words.
Oh, well, I'm a reportage illustrator, and I go to different parts of the world and draw what I find, often in misunderstood places. And I draw what I find for magazines and newspapers, and with a view to telling the stories that probably don't make your headline pages, but might be printed a bit further back in a newspaper. So I'm trying to find areas with a little bit more space, trying to tell a bit more of the story. And I think in the modern news industry, that's a very I think a vital tool in our armory.
Absolutely, and I mean the fact that you've been published in the Times, the New York Times, the Guardian, BBC. You've worked for all these clients. You've been commissioned to go to different places, war-torn regions, Syria, India. You did India as well, right?
Been to India, yeah.
Yeah. So you've been to all these kinds of places. Can you tell us how you got started on this journey of being a reportage artist?
Yeah, I did illustration at university at Kingston, and I suppose I was just fascinated by people like Felix Topolsky, Paul Hogarth, Ronald Searle, who were all drawing what they found, bit like Johanna, picking subjects that move them and then working out how to draw them best. So I was inspired by that, and although there wasn't necessarily a career path in reportage illustration, I started picking topics that I thought could be reproduced in that way. So I drew, whilst I was at uni, I spent 10 days drawing in a plastic surgeon's theatre. I drew a little girl who was having a mole removed from her nose. Wow. And it wasn't published anywhere. The drawings weren't the best in the world, but there was a theme beginning to build that the story and the illustration were worth the same amount. And then spent a couple of weeks in Afghanistan. Again, similar theme. Whilst the cameras were filming the front line action for your headlines, I was drawing young men and women who were waiting to go to war, which is, of course, what they spend 95% of their time doing. So there was begun to be a value to these drawings, personal moments that I think would have otherwise been missed. And since then, that was 15, what year are we in? That was 10 or 12 years ago. And I guess I've been trying to prove that that's a formula ever since then.
Well, it's certainly work. Looking at your body of work, it's beautiful, it's poignant, And I get where you're coming from, like urban sketching and drawing on location. You tell stories that are not the big flashy frontline news kind of thing. It's the fascinating little stories in the background. What is it like when you're working with the media, say BBC or the New York Times or something like that, and I assume you were working on are you on a freelance basis, or you're hired, you're employed by a media agency?
Very much freelance, actually, and I think that's the way. I'm afraid with illustrations for the news at the moment, it's very difficult to get. Because of the lack of space, very difficult to get work commissioned in advance. But often it will be published, or my stuff is published afterwards. So let's say, yeah. What's it like? It's an interesting thing to see, because I was on a rooftop in Iraq whilst the coalition forces were trying to take back the old city, West Mosul, back from ISIS, and we were there embedded with the Iraqi Golden Division Unit 1 in one end of the city, and there you're on the roof with the general. He's sitting under a tin roof so that the drone can't see where he's sitting, and everyone else is just staying below the wall line. And there's some cameramen there, there's some journalists with their notepads. I'm there sort of sitting down trying to draw. And then there's this extraordinary moment when the general says, that sort of summons the cameramen to the front and says 30 seconds. And they all put their cameras on the wall and press record. And then exactly 30 seconds later, the missile strikes at the target 500 meters away.
Is this that piece that you were talking about?
No, this is a more peaceful moment. This is a year after.
Okay.
But in West Mosul, the old city, so this is the mosque behind the Al Nuri Mosque, and on the right hand side there is the minaret, which was a famous leaning minaret, which was blown up by ISIS as they left. And this man, who was called Yusuf, he was renting the house that we're sitting on, and he had been arrested by ISIS and held for 18 days, and beaten up for smuggling people out of the city, which he had pleaded guilty to. And he showed me his very formal ISIS court papers. Yeah, this isn't him, actually. This is another man.
Okay. Very intense. Before we jump into all that, I think I'd like to ask you a little bit about your process, so that the folks who are watching and everyone who's tuning in, we have a lot to get into. Let's talk about how you do your pieces. What your process is like, and what tools you use.
Yeah, so all of my drawings are done from life, or I should say started from life on a single A2 sheet, so it's propped up on my hip, and quite often standing. I like to be able to move halfway through. I like that you're not too imposing if you can move around. And they're done with pen and ink and watercolor, dip pen, a pot of ink, and the pen nibs are, what are the pen nibs? I'm just looking. They're Gillette 3. There's a Gillette 303 or a 404. They all look a bit like that, right? Okay. And they're various. I guess if people want to get into it, the worst thing you can do if you want to use a dip pen is go to the art shop and buy one of those sort of brass sets of calligraphy ink with all those little brass different shaped nibs, because they are famously difficult to use. You want to find a good pot of ink, probably water it down so you keep the flow of the ink going, and then get a nib that you feel comfortable with. Some of them are more flexible than others. Some of them won't go back in the opposite direction because they're too sharp and they go into the page. And then I'm afraid it's just a question of practice and time. And
practice, yes. I think that's something that some people underestimate. They're like, how'd you get so good? I mean, it's years and years of discipline to get to where you are. I love also how you use the negative space to tell the story as well as all the details with this limited color palette. So in a piece like this, for instance, walk us through a little bit of where do you begin, how long it takes you to do that, because those are questions that everybody wants to know. The technical bits.
So I remember this. This is 2012 in a little town called Azaz. It's about 6 kilometers across the border into Syria. I walked in, met some people from the Free Syrian Army who were the moderate opposition at the time, and I mean, you're kind of up against it. I think the nice thing about drawing in ink and in a place like that is there's no time to consider whether it's going to be a nice picture at the end. You just start. And this was a man called Ishmael who was watering his goats in the place that I'd been drawing these tanks before, and I'd drawn the little boy before, and I could see him coming. And so I stood still, I think I had a translator called Mohammed, and I just started drawing as many goats' heads as possible as they came past. And then he stops underneath, and the little boy helps him fill up all these jerry cans. And they're sort of passing in 10 or 15 minutes. So the bits afterwards, then there's an opportunity to sort of slow down and do the writing and draw the background and fill in a few more goats' feet and heads and bits and pieces. So I guess that's one of the nice things. It offers a bit of time to collate an image, which you wouldn't ordinarily get in a newspaper. That you're so familiar with the snap of a shutter or a piece of sort of rolling news. But this is an image built over 20 or 30 minutes, and I think in the case of the ones that I did in Syria, I was then coloring them in afterwards, right. Partly because there were so many things that I wanted to draw that I was moving around a lot, but and also because it was so hot.
I can imagine, and the speed at which you go, I think 20 minutes, 30 minutes to capture all that it's really pretty amazing already. How do you feel that the media is treating reportage art? I mean, you were saying like you'd be commissioned to go to these places and you'd be doing these drawings, and then I assume they take their time to decide when they're going to publish them. What's the general feel?
The general feel is that I mean, without being too scathing, is that it doesn't really exist. I mean, there are occasional moments when I can persuade people to publish my drawings, and but in terms of a sort of pathway in, those days of having special artists going out and reporting for the Illustrated London News, or staff artists doing the Vietnam War for the Daily Mail, or as Gerald Scarfe did, that relationship doesn't really exist. So it's a very difficult one.
Yet you've managed to get a foothold. I mean, you've done several projects. So
yeah, but I think one of the ways they've gone about it is to match stories with newspapers. So, well, in Syria, that was the case in Syria, and also in Iraq. I did one in Afghanistan, a sort of more normal life, ordinary life on the streets of Kabul and Herat. And then sometimes find stories with charities or INGOs who can give you access to places that you wouldn't otherwise get to, and in exchange you both try and pitch those stories to the news. So it's ongoing, really.
Okay. Well, I'm so happy to see that you've actually done this. So it is possible. It's hard, but it's possible. And you've built up this huge body of work. Jumping back to a technical question, Joy would like to know why you choose to use a dip pen, because isn't it impractical dealing with an open bottle of ink?
It is impractical, but I guess but there's so many advantages to it as well. And those outweigh the disadvantages. So I think the weight of the line, the way that I try and draw it, and that in this drawing is the same case. You're not just trying to vary the thickness of the line, you're also trying to vary the tone of the ink, which you can't do, or I haven't worked out to do with another pen. So I have a pot of ink and a pot of water, which I hold in one hand.
Wow.
And then you can easily swap between, I use about 3 dip pens and also just a piece of wood cut into a point just to get a wider line. So there's an immediacy there and a sort of intensity that I don't think you get if you've got the control of a fine liner. I want that fast moving.
I understand. So it's the variable line that you get with the dip pen that you find. And
also, there's no turning back. You've got to produce when you've started. So you're shortcutting that moment of worry about whether it's going to look good, or just straight onto the page in a dip pen, and then suddenly you have to believe that you can do it. And when you're drawing people in different parts of the world and they're looking over your shoulder, there is a value to having this kind of illusion play out on a page. It's unthreatening. They can see what you're doing. They like that you're drawing their street and that you're interested and that you're spending time, and you're probably spending more time than the last person that came past with a camera. So it's impractical in some ways, but in other ways it's brilliant.
And just talking about meeting different people on the street as well and drawing different kinds of situations, it must be very emotional as well. Like this, for instance, when you're drawing this boy and I assume a parent?
Yeah, I've talked about this image before, but I think it sums up sort of conflict within going to different parts of the world and trying to draw. This is a little boy called Ahmed and his dad called Yassar, and it was in a children's ward of a hospital on the border in Syria, and I was shown in to the ward and sort of pushed in the door and just sort of told to start. I was there as a journalist. They wanted to show what was happening to people on the ground, and so this was a scene, and the nurse walked in and pulled the blanket off the stump of his leg to show me exactly what had happened. And 72 hours earlier, he'd lost his mother and his brother and his right leg, and he was now, I remember sort of trying to draw the adult's oxygen mask on his face, and obviously the sort of pain of that, and the father Yassar saying in Arabic, but translated by someone, that art can't make a difference. And so there was a real kind of moment of I guess difficulty to do you carry on drawing because you feel that it is something that people should see, or do you let the sort of social uncomfortableness of being an imposter make you sort of walk out the door? And in this case, there was a man in the corner whose son was in the other room, and he was saying, "No, stay. These are the drawings, these are the scenes that people should see to show what our government is doing to us." Wow. So I drew that, and I suppose it's sort of and followed on by that one. So 3 children in this room.
Wow.
And negative space, I guess, as you say, is just a way of focusing attention on the bits that stood out for me.
Well, this comes that there was a question that Mario asked earlier, also that it's a good question for now. Like how have these travels and all the work that you've done changed your life and vision as a person?
Small question for Sunday afternoon. Well, I think, I mean, they've influenced it more than perhaps I realized at the time. I think when I was making them, I thought that they were, you realize the sort of significance of the stories at the time, but you don't necessarily stop to think how they might change your view of the world. But they are, I guess, particularly around, I guess for the people in the drawings, they weren't necessarily significant moments in their lives. In fact, they probably don't remember that they happened, and they certainly weren't necessarily interested in keeping them, but they did influence my view of the world more than I knew at the time. And I suppose for subjects like migration or war or sort of economic migrants into Tajikistan, these are individual case studies that now sort of emotionally color my view of all of those stories that we read in the newspapers. So I think we've had the same issue around COVID. We have the same issue. How do you personalize those enormous, terrifying figures? And for me, these stories and the stories in this book are those kind of reality checks against the headlines.
I thought some people, I saw Elizabeth saying that she loves how you remember everyone's names as well. You remember the names of the people that you've drawn. What's it like? How do you process all the emotions? Because I mean, I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes. Sometimes, like, do you ask permission to draw first? Do you have an interpreter working with you, or do you speak also multiple languages?
No, I don't speak any other language. Well, none properly. I think you can't forget their names. I mean, I'm meeting them and I'm spending time with them, and their stories are, well, whatever the stories are, they're delivered in such an honest way that it's so hard to not sort of pass that message on. What was the other part of that comment? I missed the end of it.
Yeah, how do you deal with the emotional bits? Because you're meeting all these people and you're drawing them at sometimes it's like the worst day of their lives, and you capturing it in your drawings. I would imagine that it's a way to honor their life and what's happening to them as well, and telling those stories. But how do you deal with all this emotionally yourself?
Well, I think there is. How do I deal? I think. I mean, there's an advantage. There's an advantage for being the sort of bystander, that you can always leave. But I often find myself wondering what has happened to all these people. 10 years on from the beginning of the Syrian war, which we are now. Where are those? What Ahmed, who was in that picture, is now 18. I don't know if he's still alive. I don't know. So those are moments that I think are difficult. But there is also, this doesn't really answer your question from an emotional point of view for me, but I think what you don't see is, in a way, I get the advantage to meet and sit down and see the kind of hope and the dignity and the resilience, to use an overused word, of these characters. And so, a long way away on the news, you get the worst of it, because you get the headline and you've got no way of comparing. But I know the headline, but I also get to sit down and have a cup of tea with somebody and talk about the past and the future. And so there is, the drawing becomes a way of comprehending that. And although they are difficult stories, and although they drive me to draw better and to share them, there is a kind of, it does become comprehensible, and that is, I think, it's trying to make difficult subjects sort of beautiful enough for people to engage with them for longer. So, I mean, these two are probably of the saddest stories amongst them. The little boy on the left is called Khalid. He was 10 when I met him. He saw his father shot by a machine gun, and then when he escaped, his mother chucked him out of the car as they approached a checkpoint and told him to run away. And he stopped to turn around and saw her killed. Now, that is a heartbreaking story, but at the end of the story, of course, as a 10-year-old boy, he's saying, well, I want to go to school. I want to, when I grow up, I want to be a policeman so that I can protect my family. And there is a sadness, sort of it's heartbreaking and heartwarming in the same in the same breath. And that, I'm afraid, those are the realities of well, everybody in Syria has a story like that. And so, yes, those are the realities of it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, you've done a very great job, and I agree with what Terry's saying, that your art is way more powerful than some of the news reels and the little bits that we see on TV and all that. I think the fact that you've taken time to draw the portrait of a person to tell their story, you bring this human element to it that goes way beyond the photos. And I'm just wondering then, is this something that the media is starting to recognize as well? Because it's so much more powerful when you draw someone than to just snap a photo.
I think it's just so difficult to compete with photography, isn't it? It's such a mechanically brilliant, and I don't necessarily think that we should be trying to do that. But I think what the media is realizing probably is that there is a value in doing things slowly. There's also a movement of slow media, the tortoise and delayed gratification, and I think time is what we can afford each other with these drawings, and if that is the only thing that we've got to compete with, then that's what we should use. We're never going to outdraw the mechanics of photographs or drones.
That's true. I don't think we can
offering
compete.
Time.
I don't think it's possible for us to compete or replace the way artists who drew on location in, say, 100 years or so did, like Delacroix, on going to Morocco and drawing all that.
Mm.
But what I'm very heartened by your work is to see that there is a recognition of these things now. And hopefully there will be a change so that we can nudge some of the photographers aside, and and the media recognizes there is a real place for drawings on location by an artist who captures the heart of what is happening.
I mean, the irony is that it is already a proven formula. We used drawings to tell for the news long before. We weren't just using them because we were waiting for a camera to be invented. We used them because they engaged thousands of people across the world every day. So it works. We just got briefly obsessed with photographs. Okay.
Well, these were some of the works that you did in Syria, and this is Iraq. Is that right?
Yeah. So this was a similar situation to the story I was telling earlier. The man in the distance he's in charge of putting the laser dot on the building that they want to bomb. And then the man in front was called Abbas. He was 23. And, they're young lads in the Iraqi special forces. They were 10 years younger than me at the time. And the front line of the world against ISIS. So very relevant to all of our lives.
I can't imagine what it's like for these young men. I mean, to do this day in, day out. And after a while, I can only imagine that you become numb to it. You're used to the situation. But what's it like for you? I mean, you're meeting them, you're getting to know them by name. And also, in terms of your own personal safety, do you ever feel vulnerable in these sort of situations?
I think it's I don't know if I feel vulnerable. I think it's stupid not to feel vulnerable or recognize that you are to a certain extent out of your comfort zone. But you have such a luxury in the way that you get to travel and to move and to leave. I think is the safest thing, really. I mean, my time on the front line drawing is, in reality, probably a very short number of days and weeks, whereas the people in these drawings, this is Abdul Hamid's house in a place called Thara in West Mosul. That's real bravery. These guys have come back a month after their home was bombed by by a coalition airstrike to try and kill some ISIS fighters that were using their house as a place to hide. And then Abdul Hamid's come back with his friends to see if there's anything left of his home. His taxi on the right has been caught in the rubble. 2 of his brothers died. His mother was killed, and one of his brother's wives. So it's sort of not necessarily. I don't know. My part in it is fleeting and not really relevant. It's just I'm there to record the scene as accurately as possible, and so that's my intention.
Well, the fact that you're telling all these stories as well, it sounds to me like it's a balance between dealing with the heartbreak of the situation and telling the human story. So it must be such a fine line that you walk all the time.
I think it has to be done incredibly respectfully and slowly. And I think drawing is, in terms of safety and in terms of sort of being courteous of the person in front of you, drawing is such a brilliant way of doing that, because in order for me to be able to sit down and draw for half an hour or 40 minutes or an hour, I've probably got to have the permission of the people in front of me. It probably can't be overly dangerous. I don't get the luxury of taking a photograph and walking and then running off. So there is a safety net there, okay, which drawing, I think, is a great litmus test for.
Just coming back to a little bit to the technical bits, like when you're in a situation like this, you don't seem to be wearing a bulletproof jacket or anything like that. So I assume there's no immediate safety threat. Are you working with an interpreter or a guide as well in these situations?
So yeah, in the images before on the rooftop, we were wearing the right kit. In this case, this is a year later. The war stopped a year before. So no need to overdo it. That's not necessarily the point. But yeah, I often work with. I think to get the stories, you've got to have somebody local, and the closer that you can get to that, the better. So fixers or translators or both, drivers, and they can play an incredibly important role in your safety as well, and in the story that you get. So if they understand what you are looking for and the process in which you work, then they're going to be your connection to the world that you probably know nothing about by comparison.
Yes, I can only imagine.
Okay, not to think for a second that you do know anything, I think.
Very practical question right now. Change of pace a little bit. Zip Chips, Lydia from San Diego would like to know what size watercolor palette you use.
Yeah, I'm just looking.
In situations.
It's here actually. It's that size.
Ah, okay.
It's incredibly messy, isn't it?
No, I think we all get that.
Yeah, so it's just it's just one of those.
Right.
Okay. It should be smaller really, but I've never bothered to change it.
Okay. Thank you for showing us that. Okay, let's jump to some of the other images you're telling us about. Ahmed, I believe was his name?
No, this is an artist in Hamal Alil called Mustafa Altai, and actually, if you type his name into the internet, he comes up a lot. He drew under the occupation of ISIS in his town, and he recorded the scenes. He would go home and draw out what he saw. So, horrific scenes of occupation, soldiers being killed and people hung on barbed wire, and it was his therapy. It was his way through it. And then he was beaten up by ISIS when they found out that he was making drawings. And so when I was there, there was a sort of, I asked if I could draw him, and we chatted about that. And when I was sitting and drawing him, two policemen came in, and one of their friends had been killed a couple of days earlier, and they came in and asked if he could paint their sign, the sign to sort of celebrate the funeral that was coming up. So he was going to paint the two soldiers, and they gave him two photographs to paint for the funeral. So it was interesting to talk to him, because although the weight of sort of importance of both of our works is totally different, it was nice, in a way, reassuring to know that he could understand why I was doing it, and I could understand why he was doing what he was doing. And he was just one of those men, kind souls that had time for other people.
And he's doing something like what you're doing as well, but I assume he's not getting published.
No, he fixes gas heaters for a living, but he makes drawings because he likes it.
Okay.
And this is a family of a bloke called Saad, and he had 5 sons, and we spent days trying to find people in West Mosul to draw, because it was mostly deserted. And this was a moment when he had arrived a year after the fighting with the entire contents of his house on the back of that truck, and him and his sons then unloaded it into their house, which they were one of the lucky ones. They hadn't been bombed. And then in the background, people trying to restore water and electricity to the town. So there's sort of one making the other one part of the story making the other part possible. Mm-hmm. People don't come back unless there's running water.
This is one of the more optimistic images that you're painting. Then, I mean, after the aftermath, but there's building and rebuilding, and people are moving back in and all that. So,
yeah, I mean, I do paint positive things as well. It's just we've got a list of more sad stories, but certainly in this book that we'll talk about in a minute, there are moments, and this is another one of. Yeah. This is a shop. He was looted during ISIS times by ISIS, and then this shop basically existed because the whole of his town was being rebuilt. The whole of West Mosul was being rebuilt, and he was the shop that had all the stuff that was needed, the hardware shop, and then the bits of collage material that I found on the street. But that's signs of life coming back, and it doesn't take long. You just need a bit of a leg up, and then it's amazing that how quickly life pours back in.
Yeah, I love that you're capturing also the resilience of the people, and I mean during the you're capturing a conflict, you're capturing after that as well. This is also still in Iraq.
So this is the palm tree in the back right hand corner is where I was sitting to draw that man on the rooftop. This is the Al Nuri Mosque, which you should type in, see how it used to look. And then typically a scene of destruction, but on the left, some people selling lunch, I think kebabs. And on the right, a brand new sign for their kebab shop propped up against a blown up
a kebab shop. Okay.
But, it's those sort of moments that I think that I'm trying to look for, and I think that's what we should all be looking for. Ways of relating the other side of the world to somebody to see it, to an audience.
I think. Okay, let's take this question from Mario. When you're not traveling, what do you sketch in London, and how do you keep practicing?
A very good question. A lot of life drawing.
Lots of life drawing. Okay.
Yeah, which I think is key. Anything from life is obviously the best practice. I've also got. I'm also doing a couple of books and things for people and other commercial jobs. So I am. It's sort of constant, but the best practice is to walk out into the street with a piece of paper and a pen and try and get out of your comfort zone.
How do you get out of your comfort zone? I mean, you've been in all kinds of situations. Walk down the street in London must be Yeah.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I mean, those places I think are in my comfort zone, but I mean, out of your comfort zone in terms of producing an image. So try and draw a little bit bigger, or try and draw people's faces. Inevitably, everybody draws the backs of people's heads. Try and draw a scene that you are attached to before the easy option, which is always going into that kind of great cafe that we always like and sitting down and ordering a coffee and being comfortable. Those are great ways to keep the fluency, but in terms of improving, you've got to keep asking yourself questions.
Yes. There's always more. I totally agree with you. I totally understand. Like with this particular piece before, also, like there's a good question here from Jim, who'd like to know whether your subjects ever ask to keep the drawings that you do.
They don't ask. Actually, that's not true. Normally, the situation is that there is an understanding of this is my job, and therefore the drawing belongs to me. Quite often, if there's a particular connection with whoever it is, then I stay in touch and send them copies. But it's difficult to give them out. But they also don't always equate the same sort of value of them as you do. But in Armenia before Christmas, I was drawing a lot of Russian soldiers, peacekeeping forces, and me and my friend Gareth were using it as a way of getting close and interviewing them, because typically they're not allowed to speak to the press. And there were a couple of them, Vlad and Edouard and a few others, that didn't really want them themselves, but the condition was that I had to send them on WhatsApp to their wives in Moscow.
Oh, okay.
So that seemed like a fair swap.
I'm glad to hear that, and that's also a follow-up question that Jim has, which you've just answered. Do you stay in contact with some of these people, or with many of these people?
I try to. So the old lady, Mama Nazek, whose face you showed a minute ago, I've been back in touch with her recently, and a few. I mean, yeah, the answer is yes, in as many ways, in many cases as possible. They don't always want to be stayed in touch with, but they're on the move, and as I said, these moments are not necessarily significant to them, but they are to me. This man was. I mean, this is another difficult situation. We should pick some positive ones next time. But we'd been invited into this man's tent because, as a last-ditch attempt by his wife to try and find help for him, he'd had a heart attack and was almost certainly about to die. And so she saw, which is so often the case, and a very sort of morally difficult question, but she saw some white strangers walking around, thought they might be able to help, because typically that would mean that there was an NGO attached or something, and of course we couldn't help other than to tell the story of the conditions of that refugee camp in Iraq. So I mean, there's no easy way of talking about that.
No, but you tell some of the stories in your book. And before we get to the book, hang on, people. We'll show a picture of the book as well. You are often surrounded, George, by a huge crowd. How do you handle that? And how do you handle drawing with like an audience all the time, or most of the time?
Yeah, this is on the street in Dushanbe in Tajikistan, and I think that's the payoff. If you want to go to other people's homes and sit and draw, then they are allowed to look over your shoulder, and there's a security camp that comes with that. That's although it looks intimidating, that's an incredibly safe place to be sitting in amongst a crowd of people who are interested in what you're doing, and usually somebody will speak to you and share what they're saying, and then that's a moment to sort of pick a story and talk about it. So it does look intimidating, but it shouldn't be like that, because it's
a way to connect with people,
and admiration and connection, and
right.
And it doesn't really matter what you're doing on the page, even if it's blank. That's not the point of that exercise.
Well, I get that, and I think this is one way that you can connect with people, and they'll tell you stories, and they'll be like, "Oh, you should check that out," and that's one way that drawing on the street connects people all over the world. That's something that we
yeah.
Well, okay. Stories. You've got a book coming out. Tell us about it.
No, this is basically what we've just spoken about is the contents of this book. So 10 or 12 places and 10 or 12 people that I met, and where as far as possible, in their own words and not mine, what they were doing when they were migrating. Certainly probably true for lots of countries in your sort of the urban sketches audience, but migration is not necessarily something in the UK that has ever been asked of us. The UK is usually a destination that people want to get to, and so there's not always a sympathetic understanding of why people might move. It's always seen as distant, or as taking advantage, or that they don't want to go home, and that's the opposite of what I found talking to people in all of these places: Belgrade, Iraq, Tajikistan, Myanmar, East Africa, West Africa, and so these are just those stories trying to dispel some of the myths, and also, as I said before, add individual stories to those huge numbers. Now
putting a face to it.
Yeah, and migration is an issue that's going to face us more and more this century. The population will rise to 11 billion, and we're already having issues with finite resource. So makes sense to try and understand some of the reasons for moving.
Okay. Powerful book coming out. Tell the audience, I'm sure a lot of our viewers would like to know where they can find your book.
Well, available in all bookshops online, not out in the shops, mainly because the shops aren't open. But 1st of April it's published, so you can pre-order it now on all the usual ones. But if you're in the UK, then bookshop.org is a more friendly one than our favourite online store. And after that, hopefully in bookshops as soon as COVID allows.
Okay. Phew. I just saw Gladys was saying that she has to keep taking deep breaths listening to your story and the things that you've been sharing with us. I mean, it's so moving. I can't imagine what it must be like for you to be in these situations, but I guess I'm going to pick up your book and find out more. Thank you for sharing all this with us, George, and for taking the time to hang out and giving us a deeper understanding of what it's like to be in your shoes. What would you say is a quality? I think, what would you say is the most important quality, one of the most important qualities that a reportage artist like yourself has to have to work under the situations that you have?
Empathy, probably. I think you've got to care enough to understand who's sitting in front of you, and then the rest of it doesn't really matter. The rest will follow. In fact, if you have that, it makes it much easier.
Beautiful. That makes so much sense. Thank you. Again, thank you. We're coming to the end of the show, so thank you so much for joining us, George.
Thank you.
I hope to be able to meet you one day and sketch with you, maybe when you have a chance, check out the Urban Sketchers movement and
I'd love to do that. Yeah,
join us.
I'm going to read all the comments that I haven't been able to read whilst I've been talking. But
yeah, absolutely. You've touched a lot of people. So again, George, we wish you all the best, and we'll look out for your book, and we hope to meet you again sometime.
Lovely. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was George Butler. If you've just joined us not so long ago, welcome. This is USK Talks. We're coming to the end of our segment now. We had some incredible guests today. I'm sure you've seen that. And before we go, we have a few more things for you. As always, this episode, we also have a drawing challenge, a USK challenge. This time, with the theme of this episode, we would like you to dig deep and think about how you're going to tell a story and document some kind of loss that you've experienced. Reflect, share the story of something or someone you have missed, loved, or lost, maybe in the last year, maybe before that. Maybe you've documented something before and you didn't share it online. But I think one thing that we've seen with the incredible work of Johanna and George is that these stories can be painful, but I love also how they capture the beauty of the human spirit. And I'm sure you agree. I can see that also in the comments that have been coming out. It's powerful. It's intense. We have this tool, urban sketching, which helps us to heal and to deal with the situations that we might be in. So use the empathy, use the emotion that you're feeling. Channel everything that you've got from this episode and share your story with us. As always, we ask you to tag #USK Talks Challenge, tag our guests, tag Johanna as well as George, JK 2012, George Butler illustration. We thank these amazing guests again for joining us and for sharing all their stories. A few examples, like the one that you see in the graphic, is actually by Johanna. And I think this is such a poignant image. Here's something that we saw also from George earlier, and something that we have not shown today, just to show you a different slant, because Johanna's brought us something that happened right in her living room, how she dealt with the loss of her father. And George was right on the front lines and documenting the lives of people who's, it's such devastation, but also how they've recovered. Now, this piece is by Laurie Bentley. And if you just look at it, you'll think it's bobby pins and hair ties. But if you go to her Instagram, which I've added here as well, LBEE Art, she writes, sometimes a still life of ordinary items can carry a whole story. These are items I found after my daughter visited over Christmas. In fact, they are the things she sheds most often. But every time I pick up another lost hair clip, I smile. I remember how nice it is to have her here. Lockdown has taught us to appreciate every normal moment, even the shambolic ones. So there are different ways to tell the story. Think about it and share yours. So again, we'd like to thank our amazing guests. Also, a reminder, the USK Reportage Grant deadline is coming up. That is the 1st of May. So if you are thinking about submitting something, please put a proposal together. Now, I have to clarify, this is not under USK Talks. This is the Urban Sketchers movement. The EB was very moved by and inspired by all the reportage proposals that we've been getting. And we'd like to encourage more of you out there to tell more stories. So think about it. Submit a reportage proposal, and there are grants. More information on the website. Okay, final notes. We are also just a quick reminder that we are going to be shifting time. Let's see, I've got this little graphic to put up. Okay, so next week, we're taking a break, the 28th of March. There is not going to be a show. The entire USK Talks team is going to take a break, but we'll be back on the 4th of April, just something to remember. And if you have not heard already, we're going to be changing time to 3 a.m. GMT, 12 hours backwards. come 11th of April. There'll be more promos talking about that in the social media feed. So keep an eye out for that. Set your clocks, set your dates. And as always, please tag us, hashtag, share your IG stories, your posts, so that we see them. We're always inspired to see what you draw and would love to see how you approach the challenge for this week. So as always, take care of yourselves, stay safe, stay healthy, keep sketching, and we will see you not next week, but the week after that on the 4th of April. Be well, everyone. See you next time.